You're sitting on the couch, warm, comfortable, half watching something on your phone. Your cat is curled up nearby, blinking slowly, purring like it owns the room while you absent-mindedly scratch behind its ears. Now imagine the same animal on a different plate. That thought feels almost wrong. And that's strange because your cat is technically an animal just like a chicken, a pig, or a cow. It has meat, it can survive on food, it can reproduce. So why did you decide that some animals belong in your kitchen while cats belong on your sofa? The question is simple. Why don't you eat cats? And the answer starts more than 10,000 years ago when your ancestors weren't thinking about pets at all. They were thinking about grain. As farming spread through the Fertile Crescent, people began storing enormous amounts of food in one place, and wherever humans stored grain, rodents arrived. Then something else arrived: cats. Genetic and archaeological evidence suggests domestic cats descended from the Near Eastern wildcat and began associating with early farming communities roughly 10,000 years ago. They weren't dragged into villages like cows or forced into service like horses. They were probably attracted by the enormous supply of mice around human settlements. And here's what nobody tells you. The first bargain between you and the cat may have been incredibly practical. You provided the food supply. The cat provided pest control. Your ancestors didn't need to build a cat factory. They just needed to tolerate the little predator hanging around their grain stores. And that changed everything. Because once an animal becomes useful while it's alive, eating it becomes a very different calculation. Think about that for a second. A chicken gives you eggs. A cow gives you milk. A sheep gives you wool. But a cat could protect the food you already had. You weren't raising the cat to become meat. You were keeping the cat because it helped protect the food. That difference sounds tiny, but it shaped thousands of history. And then, in one of the most fascinating places imaginable, the relationship became even stranger: ancient Egypt. By the first millennium BCE, cats had become deeply connected with Egyptian religion, especially the goddess Bastet, who was represented in cat form. During Egypt's late period, roughly 664 to 332 BCE, enormous numbers of cats were mummified and placed in catacombs at places such as Bubastis and Saqqara. Your ancestors weren't looking at a cat and thinking that could make dinner. They were building statues of it. They were carrying its image. They were offering cat mummies to temples. Cats had crossed a psychological boundary. They were no longer simply useful animals. They had become symbols. And once an animal becomes part of your culture, food isn't just about biology anymore. It becomes about meaning. But here's the part nobody talks about. Cats didn't become sacred everywhere. They didn't become universally protected. People in different places and different periods have consumed cat meat, including during periods of famine or hardship, and historical records describe cat consumption in parts of Europe and elsewhere. So the idea that humans simply never eat cats is not actually true. The more interesting question is why most modern societies developed a powerful resistance to the idea. And that takes you back to economics. Imagine you're trying to raise an animal specifically for meat. You want something that grows quickly, produces a useful amount of edible tissue, reproduces efficiently, and can be raised economically. Now compare that with a cat. A cat is small. It doesn't produce milk for you. It doesn't give you wool. It doesn't pull your plow. And unlike cattle, pigs, chickens, or sheep, it was never heavily transformed through selective breeding into a major livestock animal. Modern genetic research suggests cats remained relatively close to their wild ancestors for thousands of years, with much weaker human-driven changes than economically important farm animals. That matters, because your ancestors didn't need to turn cats into meat machines. The cat already had a job. It hunted. It adapted. It reproduced. And most importantly, it lived around you without requiring the kind of intensive management needed by livestock. So why spend resources raising cats for meat when your farm already had animals much better suited for that purpose? There's another strange twist. Cats actually created the very food system that made other animals valuable. Your grain attracted rodents. Rodents threatened your grain. Cats controlled the rodents. That protected the food. And the protected foods supported larger settlements, larger populations, and eventually increasingly specialized agriculture. The cat didn't become dinner, it helped protect dinner. That is a surprisingly powerful distinction. And eventually, the relationship became emotional. Your ancestors started living alongside cats for generations. Cats traveled with humans along trade routes, and ancient DNA evidence shows Egyptian cats later spread widely through the Mediterranean and beyond. The animal that once waited beside a grain store eventually slept beside you. The hunter became a companion. And now you reach the modern world. You can walk into a supermarket and see chicken, beef, pork, lamb, and fish arranged neatly under bright lights. But you probably won't find cat. Not because cat meat is biologically impossible, not because cats are magically different from every other edible animal, and not because your ancestors universally agreed that cats must never be eaten. The deeper answer is that you inherited a relationship. You inherited thousands of years of choices about what an animal is for. Your ancestors looked at a cow and saw milk, labor, and eventually meat. They looked at a chicken and saw eggs and meat. They looked at a sheep and saw wool. And they looked at a cat beside the grain store and saw something different. A useful predator. Then a symbol. Then a companion. So when you scratch your cat behind the ears tonight, you're participating in an arrangement that began before cities, before supermarkets, before written history. You're enjoying the final stage of an ancient bargain. Your ancestors had grain, rodents, and a problem. The cats had hunger. The cats solved the problem. And somewhere along the way, you stopped seeing them as food. That warm little animal beside you isn't sitting there because nature decided it should be your pet. It's because thousands of years of human choices made it family.